We have doors to knock on. We have people to talk to. We have phone calls to make. And we have an election to win.
Vice President Kamala Harris now with unanimous support from Connecticut's delegation and enough support nationally to be the presumptive Democratic nominee for the top of the ticket. A quick and unexpected campaign launch welcomed with a flood of donations and excitement in the party. But the reactions do vary, and there are serious questions about what happens now and how this could impact the election. We sat down earlier with Dr. Wesley Renfro from Quinnipiac University to break it all down.
So, we've heard a lot of talk with everything that's happened in the past week about how long it's been historically since a president has pulled out of re-election. But this is really the first time we've seen it happen this late in the game. So what have reactions been like to that among, analysts and experts right now about, everyone throws around the word unprecedented, but it really seems like it definitely is an unprecedented situation, right?
Yeah, it truly is. And I think that there are some very smart people offering commentary. Nobody actually really knows what will happen. I think that a couple things are important, though. One, the Harris campaign kickoff went about as smoothly as one could have wanted it to, both in terms of Democratic support and fundraising coalescing around her. I also think that the president's remarks will help soften the public perception of him. It was quite poignant. And also, I think it's really important to remember that Donald Trump is phenomenally unpopular. Joe Biden was also very unpopular. There's a real opportunity for Kamala Harris to reset and make herself better known among the American people. The degree to which she will be successful remains to be seen, but it has certainly upended the narrative.
And with that, with President Biden stepping aside and then endorsing Vice President Harris, in addition to it going really smoothly, I think something we've also been hearing from a lot of people and even just seeing from conversations as well as on social media is this sort of invigoration of the party, a lot of momentum, a lot of energy. How do you think not just her campaign, but those volunteering voters in general can keep that momentum around for the next 100 so days heading into November?
Yeah, so a couple things. I think it's really striking if you listen or watch the remarks that candidate Harris gave in Wisconsin the other day. In contrast to Joe Biden, she is younger, she is livelier. Some of her policy positions also align a little bit more closely with the base of the Democratic Party, including younger voters. So I think that there is a chance for her, lest there's a major misstep, to continue to get people excited about her campaign. And I will say that, every election is a mix of, both turnout and persuasion. But in recent elections, they've mostly been about turnout. And Democrats do better when turnout is high. So I think she'll certainly be trying to message in a way that gets people excited and turns out her base.
And I think a lot of this, too, even though she's coming off of 3.5 years of being the vice president, we know that that office is really, the supporting base of the president. So there's been a lot of talk about who Kamala Harris actually is. Where does she stand on issues? Who is she really as a person separate from just, the Biden administration? Do we see that as possibly a challenge for the campaign, because we know they want to show her record and they want to play off the Biden administration, but she is also her own person.
Yeah, I do think that it's a challenge. And I think that Kamala Harris has two tight paths to walk. One is to, on some level, try and ensure some sense of continuity and not suggest that the administration which she was VP was doing things incorrectly, but also establishing her own identity and an identity that will likely promote Democratic base turnout because that is what she needs to win. Also, the electoral map is a little bit tighter for the Democrats. When you think about all the possible pathways to hitting 270 in the Electoral College, she has fewer options available to her unless there's a real sea change and some states like Georgia come back into play. That's possible. I don't know that that's likely. So it's definitely going to be a very delicate balancing act.
So beyond the challenge now of just sort of, shaping up this campaign, we know obviously the DNC virtual roll call vote hasn't happened yet, but as we've seen from, all the polling of the delegates, she really is shaping up to be the presumptive nominee now. So, besides just logistical and possible legal challenge when it comes to ballot access, as her campaign kicks off, are there any other hiccups you're keeping an eye out for as we move forward now?
Self-inflicted wounds. There's going to be a lot of scrutiny on candidate Harris in a way that there wasn't when she was and is still Vice President Harris. And certainly when we think back to her failed presidential campaign in 2020, she started strong, but frankly wasn't a very personally compelling candidate. And so I think that she needs to bring high energy levels, charisma. And one thing I think that she's doing very smartly is trying to frame this election as not going back, looking forward, a younger, more future-oriented direction. We've already done Donald Trump once. Let's try something else. So she needs to be consistent and clear and energetic and avoid any self-inflicted wounds that would give potential voters a reason to second-guess themselves.
And we know there has been a lot of mention of the legality of this in general, as well as, possible financial issues. But since we really haven't seen anyone else at all throw their hat into the ring as a contender here, we are hearing that there really shouldn't be any issues because it's still far enough out. She was already a part of the previously Biden-Harris ticket, and therefore she has access to all of these, resources that were already donated. But in the past, just, few days since she was endorsed and really, gained ground, we've seen this flood of donations, not just, from large entities and from PACs, but just from grassroots people. We've seen a flood of people, signing up to volunteer. What do you think that means politically for the campaign to see all of this just in the past few days?
Yeah, so firstly, it's pretty unlikely that there will be any successful legal challenges about ballot access or access to Biden-Harris campaign funds. That's pretty well established. Money matters in politics a great deal. I think that people sometimes get it wrong, the degree to which money matters, mostly because in the past 30 or so years, candidates have been awash in money, and there aren't really, major party candidates who can't find the funds that they need. And this also occurs at a time when there's so much imputed media value from social media and repeats of clips and so on and so forth. But I do think that it's telling as a marker of enthusiasm. Certainly in 2020, people in the Democratic Party didn't automatically love Joe Biden because they agreed with his policy preferences or his age. They wanted to beat Donald Trump. It became very clear that the Biden campaign was failing, and I think that there's many Democrats who now believe that they have a better chance of beating Donald Trump, which is their primary objective, and they will support this candidate vocally and with their wallets.
And last thing here, since she has really shown as the presumptive nominee in our last couple minutes, this conversation has already really quickly shifted to who her possible vice presidential pick could be. We're seeing a lot of names thrown out there, mainly trying to bring to the table what she doesn't bring. So we've obviously seen tossed around a lot of Democratic governors from key states. As well as obviously Senator Mark Kelly from Arizona. What are you thinking in terms of, what we could see as a possible VP pick for Harris?
So, the Harris campaign has not called me to inform me of their plans, but, unfortunately, a couple things. There's not a lot of evidence, actually, that the vice presidential selection impacts electoral outcomes, but the context here matters a great deal. Certainly in 2016 and in 2020, the election was decided by really small numbers. We're talking tens of thousands of votes in key states. It's going to be the same. It's a hyper-competitive landscape. And so, although they generally don't don't matter. It certainly could matter this time. I think that Vice President Harris will be looking for someone with whom she can work, somebody who will appeal to the Democratic Party, but probably the more conservative edge of the Democratic Party, because Kamala Harris is slightly to the left. And I do think that there will be some political considerations in terms of the following. Home state, is there somebody like Josh Shapiro who might be able to nudge Pennsylvania in her column? While also not wanting to remove somebody from their office in a state, whether they are a governor or a senator, where it is not assured that the replacement senator or governor will be a Democrat. They don't want to sort of give up a governorship or a Senate seat. So I think that's sort of the framework in which she will be operating.
We know come November, it's not just the White House on the ballot. There are lots of other down ballot races as well. And Democrats are obviously trying to win back the House, keep or even grow a majority in the Senate. So there's definitely a lot of other impacts there. Well, Wes, always wonderful to speak with you. I'm sure we'll be checking in as, it feels like it's been a long time, but it's only been a couple of days and there's still so much to show up here in the 2024 races. So thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you for having me.
What could still change the election and impact Harris's base, though, is the large voting bloc outraged about the crisis in Gaza. We spoke with local advocates who took their demands to D.C., marching on the nation's capital before Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's address to Congress this past week, a speech boycotted by many lawmakers. Many of the party's uncommitted voters still unsure if they're willing to now vote for Kamala Harris come November without a ceasefire or conditions on weapons and aid to Israel. I have that conversation and more online and on the Fox 61 News app. Plus, we'll be speaking to more of those pro-Palestinian advocates next week here on The Real Story. Have a great rest of your morning.